might get going. I'd really like to welcome everyone who's joining us on our Google Hangout this evening. We're Solar Citizens. We're an independent community-based organisation that protects the rights of solar owners and people who want solar in Australia. We will have some technical difficulties this evening, and one is my phone is ringing, so I'm just going to grab that now. All right, so I've just lost that call. Thanks again for being with us this evening. We've got a pretty packed agenda of about 45 minutes of information to get across to you tonight. But before I get into that, I'll just let you know that Solar Citizens was launched midway through last year to really represent the interests of solar owners and everyone around Australia who wants to get solar. Now, look, to most Australians, using the power of the sun to generate solar just makes sense. But solar owners, as many of you will know who are on the line tonight, are coming under increased attack with the windback of solar tariffs, new fees and taxes, and also a threatened windback of the renewable energy target. So tonight is the last in a series of public forums which have been the first time solar owners and supporters have come together to discuss this current situation, and we're going to really talk about what we're going to do about it. So we've already held 4 face-to-face forums around the country this month, in Brisbane, in Sydney, Melbourne and Adelaide, and we've had close to 1,000 people come along to those events, which have been a lot of fun and really good to see everybody coming along to support solar. And of course, due to popular demand, we're putting this online tonight. So we've had about 400 people RSVP, which is fantastic, and hopefully many of you are tuning in. But because of the format we're using tonight, the meeting is going to take a little bit of a different tack to the 2-hour face-to-face events that we've been putting on. But we do hope you find it valuable, and please bear with us if we do experience any other technical difficulties. And before we get going, and just to give a sense of who is here in the crowd, we like to get a bit of a sense of that by doing a quick online survey. So you'll need to do that by opening a separate tab in your internet browser, open a new tab there, and then to go and get that survey going, can you please type in www.solarcitizens.org.au/hangout_survey. I'll put that link up in my description of my name very shortly, but just to read that to you again, it's www.solarcitizens.org.au/hangout_survey. So I'll just bring that up very quickly for you now. Just bear with me for 1 second. There you go. You should see that link underneath my name just there on the screen in front of you. So just type that URL into your browser, and then there's a few questions there that we'd love you to answer just over the next kind of 5 or 10 minutes while we get on with the meeting. So I'll just read those questions out so you get a bit of a sense of what they are. We'd really like to know what state you're tuning in from this evening. We'd also love to know whether you're a solar owner or whether you're not a solar owner but would like it, or if you're a supporter of solar technology. We're also interested, particularly from people tonight, if you're working in the solar industry, and also a lot of people have been asking us about storage. So one of the questions there asks about whether you have storage, whether you want storage, whether you're not yet looking at storage at all. So as I said, just head along in a new tab in your browser and go to www.solarcitizens.org.au/hangout_survey, and you can complete those questions now, and we'll come back a little bit later on in the session and let you know the results of that survey so we get a sense of where we're all coming from this evening. Thank you very much for that. Now, moving right along and getting right into it, let's get it underway. Our agenda for tonight. We're first going to hear a presentation from Warwick Johnston. Now, Warwick is the Managing Director of SunWiz, which is a consultancy that arms Australian solar businesses with the tools and strategic intelligence they need to survive and thrive. He's going to outline the current status of solar in South Australia and where it's going to from here, and Warwick is a really terrific last-minute stand-in for our other solar analyst friend and champion, Nigel Morris, who unfortunately was not able to attend tonight at the last minute, and he sends his apologies for that. After Warwick's presentation, we'll be putting a few of your questions to Warwick that people have been sending us during the day today. And then we'll hear from Lindsay Suter, the National Director of Solar Citizens. She'll share the story of Solar Citizens so far and talk about what's coming up in terms of our campaigns and issues that we'll be working on. There'll be plenty of opportunities for you to get involved following tonight's meeting, and we're going to work really hard to hopefully wrap everything up well ahead of 7:30 p.m. tonight Eastern Time. So what I'd really love to do now is hand over straight to Warwick to update us on the status of solar, but I do believe Warwick has someone he'd like to introduce to us tonight first.
Great. Hi, my name's Warwick, and this is Sunny. I hope you can see him on the screen now. He's a representative of the solar industry, and he is the person who, the dog who we see out there in all my marketing, always being the fighter for the solar industry. Anyway, I just wanted to introduce you to him. There's a lot of people out there who know and adore him as a solar mascot. We'll put him on the ground now and allow me to get started. So, apart from being Sunny's owner, I'm also a consultant to the solar industry, and I'm just going to bring up the presentation that I've got for you today. And it looks like I've just got an error, so I'm going to have to come back to you in a moment. I'm back. I'm sorry about dropping out on you there. I hope that you can hear me now. Lindsay, can you just confirm that you've got me there now?
Yep, I can hear you.
Great. So let me get back to sharing this presentation with you. Let's hope it works this time. Okay, so it looks like I should be having that presentation up in front of you on your screens now, and I hope that you're with me. So SunWiz is a company that I run, and it provides information to solar businesses around the country and to the politicians and the industry organisations. And our role is to facilitate a good transfer of knowledge amongst those participants. We also act to lobby the government for things which are more favourable to the solar industry than they might otherwise believe. And the picture you can see on the screen is actually our involvement from the Solar Citizens meeting that occurred in Brisbane. This is a photo of myself writing a letter to an MP. This was a handwritten letter, which was a very impressive exercise of the Solar Citizens as one of the activities for lobbying the country representatives. So just a little bit more about myself. Heavily involved in the industry, involved in the Clean Energy Council, particularly the PV Leadership Committee, and I'm also the chair of the PV Directorate of the Clean Energy Council. But beyond the Clean Energy Council, I assist every other PV industry organisation in the country, including Solar Citizens, and I'm a regular donor and contributor to that organisation. So I'm really happy to be speaking for Solar Citizens today, and I hope that you're also passionate Solar Citizens and indeed making your own letter writing activities and donations where possible to the organisation. What we're going to go through today in tonight's presentation is having a look at the state of Australian solar and have a look at why the utilities are so threatened by solar. Really, we are seeing that there's a solar revolution that's underway. We'll be looking at why it's not your fault that everyone's upset with solar, but have a look at their motivations for why they're using solar as a scapegoat and some of the actions they're taking to try and thwart us. That includes a move towards fixed fees and tariffs. We'll be covering the importance of the RET, and that's the renewable energy target, and lastly we'll be getting to the rise of battery storage. So first I'm going to point to a graph which talks about the state of Australian solar. Where have we been? This graph that's on your screens now shows the monthly installed capacity across the nation for the years of 2010 to the last data point we have in 2014. And what's really noticeable about this image is that we can see there's a strong build-up of the solar industry in 2010 that led to peaks in 2011 and an even higher peak in 2012. But there was a lot of oscillation that was happening in intervening months. For this reason, the solar industry has been likened to a roller coaster. Indeed, Nigel Morris, who would be speaking in if it weren't for his absence tonight, he has termed this industry a solar coaster. And you can understand with all those ups and downs why this has been. Now, the reasons for these massive surges and dives in installed capacity has really been government control of levers, both at the federal and the state level, where they've been trying to control this runaway beast, and that's usually resulted in both a surge and then an instant fall back. And this hasn't been good for stability in the industry, and it hasn't been good for efficiency. It's been very difficult to get by. But more recently, in 2013 and 2014, we've seen comparable stability. Fairly much lower volumes that have happened than in previous years, but a healthy stability in the industry. It's like what we've always been asking for. Please allow us to just get on with it without giving us all these setbacks in policy has finally come to fruition, and we've seen a nice stable trajectory. However, though the policy incentives are pretty much at their lowest as that you could expect, what we're seeing now is that governments are lining up against solar to undo whatever's there that remains, which is the renewable energy target principally. They've already wound back all the feed-in tariffs. They've already wound back the solar multipliers that applied in the renewable energy target. All that's really left is the small-scale technology scheme, those STCs, which you might have got as a discount on your system. And they cover about 25 to 30% of the system cost. And the other part that remains is the feed-in tariffs, and they're voluntary across the country. So really there's not much worse that you'd think that things could get, but they're definitely trying. We're seeing that, and this slide in front of you shows, and it's borrowed from Nigel Morris, the kind of schemes that existed in 2012 and how now in 2014 we're seeing pretty much the removal of every solar incentive or that existed, and a lot of uncertainty about what's moving forward. What's frustrating about this is that with whatever's remaining, they're also not only trying to reduce that by stripping away the renewable energy target, but they're also trying to put barriers on existing solar users and barriers to deployment from new solar users as well. So the byline being, despite declining support and increasing challenges, the solar industry has been very stable and highly competitive, which has delivered excellent value to the people that have bought solar. However, we're at a position now where we are under severe threat from being able to deliver solar to your friends, your family, and your neighbours. And so I want to look at why there has been this backlash. There's been something that's called a death spiral. And what this, and I'll explain this, this is why utilities are particularly ganging up against solar. And what we see is that as more people go solar and put solar on their roofs, they're using electricity far less from remote coal-fired power stations, and so the utilities are able to sell you less solar. The problem is that the networks still have these massive fixed costs. They have to maintain all the poles and wires, but also they have to recover the costs of the massive overspend they made in network expansion with the expectation that electricity demand would go up. Instead, they're seeing electricity demand go down, and that's because people are using, yes, because the prices are so high, but it's also people are using less grid electricity because they're supplying their own with solar, largely because the prices are so high. So what this means is the networks have to recover the same amount from less and less energy sales that they're making. And this means that they have to put the prices up further, and then solar becomes even more viable, which means that the utilities get to sell us less power and then have to again put the prices up. So that's what's called the utility death spiral, and this is why the electricity networks themselves are pretty much against solar. But it's not only the networks which are facing these problems, it's also the electricity generators who are able to sell less energy, and the electricity retailers who are also able to sell less energy, who are finding that their business model is thwarted by rooftop solar. So this is why people are ganging up against us. So what we're seeing now is the makings of a solar revolution, because we've got over 1 million, it's actually I think now 1.25 million solar households with a solar power system on their roof, plus those with solar hot water. So it's estimated that 5 million Australians live under a roof with solar panels on it of some sort. Now, every time somebody comes out and says the solar panels are evil, these 5 million people think, I don't think so. I think there's something wrong here. Perhaps solar's been made a scapegoat, and indeed it is. While energy ministers, including that in Queensland, likes to point the finger of blame at solar for rising prices, green schemes are a very small component of electricity bills, and indeed there's a massive distortion in the market between those who have lots of air conditioners being paid for by those who don't have air conditioning or only have a small amount of air conditioning in their house, essentially because those people with large or lots of air conditioning are putting the greatest stress on the network. Indeed, solar is going some ways to alleviating some of that network stress, but yet those networks and the governments that own them, particularly the Queensland government as a clear example, are trying to blame solar in order to defer the focus of the public from the government, who has been making these bad decisions. And what's interesting, of course, is it's the state governments that own much of the generation capacity around Australia, and indeed sometimes they're the electricity retailers as well, and often they're the electricity distributors. And all of these are ways that they are able to raise money and raise revenue, what could be called indirect taxation. And we're reducing their ability to do so. And before, they could essentially had all these consumers under their power. However, what we're seeing now is that solar owners have, for the first time, can compete with the utilities, can compete with all these electricity companies and the government, and we're reducing their power over us. So it's like, what do they do next? Well, they start to dismantle the solar coaster rails in front of us, and that's what that image is down on the bottom left there. They now are trying to put in regulatory barriers and disincentives for putting up solar, and this is of great concern, not only for those people who might go solar in the future, but also those people who already have solar, which are probably most of those people listening to this call. So what are some of these dirty electricity tricks that we see? One of the ones which we're under threat from is a move towards fixed fees and charges. Now, at the moment, part of your electricity bill is made up from the fixed fee component, and then there's the variable fee component. The variable component is what varies depending on how much consumption you have. That's the cents per kilowatt hour on your bill. but the fixed fee is just your dollars per day or dollars per bill that you pay, and in some locations that's as high as $1 a day, and there's nothing you can do about it except for disconnect from the grid, which we'll talk about in a moment. But essentially what they try and do is shift the costs from the cents per kilowatt hour towards the fixed fees and charges, so that solar becomes less competitive and induces less people to go solar. Now, that can be problematic because it also reduces people's incentive to go and install any other energy efficiency device, such as LEDs or other efficient light bulbs, etc. And it's some kind of hidden solar discrimination. Indeed, there's things that are happening in South Australia for commercial solar which are highly discriminatory towards solar. Thankfully, solar citizens have been able to get a promise from the Energy Minister that there won't be any particular punitive fees, especially for solar, but that doesn't stop the ministers nationwide from just shifting the way that people buy electricity. The other dirty electricity tricks are making feed-in tariffs only voluntary. So we've seen in New South Wales, for example, that there's been no, the feed-in tariff isn't mandated, it's just a voluntary payment made by your electricity retailer, and it's generally far lower than the cost of solar, actually. We also see that the and so, for example, by contrast, in Queensland we saw that there was a fixed value of a feed-in tariff that was guaranteed by the government, but many people in southeast Queensland are no longer going to have that guarantee. We contrast that to Victoria, where there is a mandatory minimum amount of feed-in tariff that people have to provide. It can be higher, but you have to provide at least that value. It's like a consumer protection. It's still not the full value of solar, but it's at least a backup there. So we're under threat not only from their regulations, but also particularly from the Renewable Energy Target Review, which is happening at the moment. And this is where really it's the Prime Minister has appointed a climate denier and some coal barons and things to review the Renewable Energy Target only a year after it was reviewed by the Independent Climate Change Authority, who recommended that no change be made except stop reviewing it. Now, the problem for people who want to buy solar is that the renewable energy target is what makes solar affordable for everybody. It offers it covers about a quarter to a third of the upfront system price and provides you with a discount, which means that you can buy a solar system for a couple of $1,000 or a 5 kilowatt solar system, which covers most people's household needs for less than $10,000. Now, if that discount gets removed, then the payback period could jump from 5-6 years out to 9 or 10 years, and that would really dampen people's appetite for solar and the ability to go solar. The renewable energy target also ensures the quality of products and installations, and it enables your friends and families to beat these electricity bullies. Of course, most people believe the renewable energy target should be kept the same or be higher. Very few people believe that it should be reduced. However, one of the few people that does is the Prime Minister and those in his in the coalition. I'll make a quick statement on batteries. For many people, batteries are seen as the way to finally disconnect from the grids, where they can finally chop that wire which binds them to the government, who have got them over the barrel otherwise. Particularly people who've installed solar, who've got some energy independence but might be transitioning off premium feed-in tariffs, or people who've got going solar and want to start saying, well, let's not be, let me say that when the government says we'll just increase your fixed fees, there comes a point where people go, well, why would I pay for fixed fees for the privilege of being connected to the grid? I'll supply my own storage facility and disconnect from the grid. We'll cover this in the Q&A, but these people really are early adopters. There's not a mass market for batteries in Australia yet, and perhaps the reason why is because they're still quite expensive. the financial justification for disconnecting from the grid and going self-storage isn't really there just yet. It may be there in 4 or 5 years, in my belief. And it also has some impacts upon the way people can consume electricity. That said, there is a hybrid, like an in-between, where you still keep your connection to the grid, but you start to store your own solar energy rather than exporting it to the grid for a pittance. And so you'll still have that same fixed fee for just having the privilege of having the grid there, but you won't be using it very much. And it's kind of like a stepping stone to doing your own off-grid system. And just to conclude, I'd like to point out that though they're bringing the fight to us, it's only because we are clearly in a strong position against them, and they're throwing everything that they can at us. But despite all this, all the modelling that we see for the RET review points to the fact that solar is inevitable. It's just how painful will it be for those people who are currently the incumbent electricity suppliers and the governments that support them. So I encourage you to take up that fight so that we can make them realise that it's best to go solar now rather than be anti-competitive against solar and set the Australian solar industry back 5 years. So with that, I'll hand that back and open up for questions.
Great, thanks Warwick. Thank you very much for that comprehensive and detailed look into the situation, the state of solar in Australia as we see it at the moment. We will throw to Q&A, the Q&A session in just a moment, but first I did want to give a big shout out to a couple of people who are tuning in through Google tonight. Keith Harvey, who has kindly posted our survey link onto Google. Keith, you're hailing from my hometown of Toronto in New South Wales. Also, Bob Rich, who's in Healesville near Melbourne, who has had solar since the 1980s, a very early adopter there, which is terrific to see,
wow.
Bob. And Di Elif from Hobart. We've got people from all over the country tuning in tonight, which is really fantastic to see. Look, for those of you who have just tuned in, we've been listening to Warwick Johnston, who's the Managing Director of Sunwiz, a consultancy that provides businesses with the tools they need to survive and thrive in what is actually a really challenging industry from what you would have heard in the last 10 minutes or so. One other thing I'd like to just mention before we get to our Q&A, you'll see that there is a survey link at the bottom of the screen that my face is on. That if you would like to go to another tab in your browser and enter that URL, which is www.solarcitizens.org.au/hangout_survey, you can take part in a short survey that gives us a sense of where you're from and what your views are, and also a lot of you have kind of jumped the gun into the second part of the survey, which is great to see as well. And we'll leave that survey open until a little bit after the Q&A session that's coming up, and then we'll reveal some of those answers. So get to that survey while you're listening in on the Q&A. So let's get started with a few questions. So we will keep the Q&A session reasonably brief. What we're going to do is we've had people sending in questions to us during the day today, and we've just kind of pulled together some really typical questions that represent kind of common concerns that people have, and also quite similar to a number of concerns and questions that people have had in the public forums that we've been hosting all around the country in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne and Adelaide during this month. So I'll just hop straight into it, Warwick. Our first question is really about a kind of the two-speed solar citizen situation that we have in front of us, not only in Queensland, where this question really comes from, but also across other states and as well around the country. So in Queensland, for example, people who got solar prior to a certain date received approximately a 45-cent feed-in tariff per kilowatt hour, and that's guaranteed until 2028. Now, those who bought a home after that particular date used to receive 8 cents from the same government agreement plus a small token from the retailer. But from next week, that all changes and they'll only receive the token from the retailer. So this obviously is totally inequitable, leaves the retailers able to fleece solar owners by obtaining cheap power that they can then on-sell for a profit. So the question is here, can we actually force the government to legislate that retailers must pay this feed-in tariff at the same rate as they sell the retail power for? You know, that will promote equity, recognise the fact that home installations, especially here in Australia, help utilities and communities avoid building more traditional power generating facilities. So I'll straight over to you, Warwick. What's your response to that kind of situation? What can we do about it?
Well, look, we've already seen that solar citizens can be an immensely powerful political force. Indeed, we've forced backdowns from the Western Australian government, we've forced backdowns from the New South Wales government, and solar citizens as a group have also got a commitment from the from the Queensland Energy Minister not to introduce any punitive fees for solar, in particular. So we are powerful. That said, there has been a review that's happened, and the Queensland government has decided to go and say we're not going to give 8 cents anymore. We're going to leave it to the electricity retailers to provide whatever they want to provide. They're following down the New South Wales path, which is for a voluntary feed-in tariff, as compared to the Victorian path, where you have a mandated minimum amount. Now, the challenge is what should, can we get a mandated minimum amount as happens in Victoria? And I think with political pressure, we certainly could. What would that amount be? What experience shows around Australia that it's going to be far less than the retail value of electricity. It's not going to be a one-for-one feed-in tariff. I think we would be incredibly fortunate if we were able to force that outcome. And the reasons they say that that's not going to be the case is because it would force the electricity retailers to make a loss. We think the value that they're setting is far lower than the actual value of solar, and we can have intellectual debates around that. But I don't expect that we'll ever get back to a situation of receiving the same as retail value for the power we export. But we can set our ambitions on actually getting a guaranteed minimum. Electricity retail competition is supposed to deliver us some reasonable value for solar, but really the electricity retailers aren't likely to incentivize you to compete with them on the retail level, let alone the electricity generation assets they provide. But no government in Australia has recognised that, really. So I think for the moment it's pretty much comes down to, can we politically get a minimum mandatory amount, and to what extent can you shift your energy consumption into the daytime period? So can you put those loads that you might be able to defer, like a washing machine, clothes washer, etc., on during the day, as distinct from perhaps they're putting them on at night. Those sorts of behavioural switches can help you maximise the solar value from your installation, and keep being politically active.
Terrific. So we can see it's a good policy is certainly one thing we'll be talking about a bit later on in tonight's session, and good to know as well that we can make those small little adjustments to our own energy use that will actually maximise the benefit we can draw from our rooftop solar systems. Now, this next question that we've got tonight is really delves a bit more deeply again into the storage issue. A lot of people are interested in storage. So the question here is, what is the current situation in Australia at the moment with regard to commercially available batteries that will store solar energy produced through the day so we can use it at night and then go off the grid altogether? And this is from someone who used a typically modest amount of electricity of about 7 kilowatts an hour per day.
Okay, great. Look, it's a great question. It's a question that a lot of people are asking. Can I disconnect from the grid, or can I start, soaking up that excess energy from the sun and using it on site later? And the answer is yes. Technically, you can. you'd certainly be an early adopter. There aren't too many systems around the country, perhaps less than 1,000, which are like that, but they're certainly technically viable. We're also seeing batteries reduce in price, and they're following similar trajectories to the price reduction we've seen in solar panels. The problem is that their price is still far higher than their value. You can certainly go ahead and do this technically, but you're going to be paying a lot upfront for the privilege of doing so, and essentially the payback on that investment may take 15 or plus years. So would you invest that money instead in a larger solar system? You might find that's a more profitable investment. So I've seen a lot of studies that say, okay, well, when will batteries be viable? And a year and a half ago, the answer was when they fall in price fourfold. So they need to be a quarter of the price they were a year and a half ago. A lot of solar retailers are saying we're almost there, and they're getting very excited. I think we have to be careful about that, just considering the ongoing costs of batteries. But the fact is that some of the electricity utilities are starting to think, well, we are almost there. We need to watch this space very carefully. So I think it's really a matter of watch this space. We will see increasingly this become a viable option, but I suspect that it's a few years away yet.
Just unmute myself there. Thank you very much, Warwick. So just moving along to our third question for this evening, and then we will wrap up and move on. There is a question here about people who are renting. For people who are renting and can't afford to buy a house at the moment, they, often, people in this kind of situation can't afford the incredible power price rises that we're seeing across the country as well. So Warwick, could you tell us a little bit about what is there in the pipeline at the moment for portable solar power installations that could be used by renters?
It's a fantastic idea, and it's something which I thought about maybe 6 years ago myself when I was renting. The first thing I did when I bought a house was that very weekend I put my own solar power system on. I've thought that this portable solar power system for renters is a great idea. I haven't seen much activity in the solar retailer sphere of developing and promoting that. And that's probably because it's easier to sell systems to non-renters. But one of the barriers that exists there is the cost of changing the meter over. So let's say that in certain states or distribution areas, that cost can be $250 to $450 just to change that electricity meter from its current form into a solar compatible form. And if your solar system is going to produce you, let's say, $800 worth of value in a year, then at least for the first year you're going to be suffering coming from behind a fair way. And if you as a renter move around a lot, then you're going to be facing those fees every time you move. So that's a real difficulty. The other part is when I rent the place that I move into next, will that also be solar compatible? Will it be unshaded? Can I put this structure in a place in the backyard that's suitable? I think if you're enthusiastic about solar, you can definitely find answers that are yes to all of those. Or if you're a long-term renter, then that's certainly another option. But yeah, I don't see much activity in that area. I would love it to come. If you're joining us from Canberra, the ACT government has a community solar model in which you can invest in solar panels that are hosted on another building and get a return from those. And the New South Wales government has also set up some funding to investigate similar community models around New South Wales. The only one that really is about to certainly exist is in Canberra, but watch that space as well if you're a renter.
Okay, thank you very much, Warwick. So that just about wraps up our Q&A session for this evening. You'll see that there's a little survey link under my name for people who are just joining the event tonight. just in the last couple of minutes. I'm just going to report back on some of the results of that survey, which are really, really interesting. So we've got about 115 people tuning into the broadcast right now, and there's 30% hail from New South Wales, 30% from Queensland, 14% from Victoria, 9% from WA, 8% from Tasmania, 5% from our nation's capital, and 1% tuning in from the Northern Territory. You probably won't be so surprised to hear that 92% of the people on the line tonight are solar owners. 5% want solar, and I think perhaps there might be 2% of people out there who are sitting on the fence, but we'd certainly encourage you to get on board. 60% of people tuning in tonight are interested in storage. 5% have storage, and 28% haven't yet looked into that issue. So there certainly are a lot of early adopters in this group tonight. And certainly 88% of our viewers tonight are working in the industry, so it's great to have you all on the line. You're a really important part of how we can actually really help protect and grow solar and improve policy. So we're going to leave that survey open. You'll see the URL is under my name here, just to let you know that you're at the Protect public meeting on Google Hangouts to protect solar tonight, a Solar Citizens initiative, and you're with Claire O'Rourke, who's the campaigns director. So now we're just going to hand over to Lindsay Suter, who is our National Director, and she's going to share the story tonight of Solar Citizens. So Lindsay is the founder and director of this organisation that we are proud to be a part of. She has spent more than 8 years as a campaigner and community organiser working to advance renewable energy in Australia. She is a former Young Environmentalist of the Year and lives in the inner west of Sydney with 2 kilowatts of solar on her roof and getting a gigantic 5 cents per kilowatt hour for the energy she puts into the grid. Just to let you know, for those who aren't aware, there is no longer a mandated feed-in tariff in New South Wales. Okay, so I'll hand over to you, Lindsay.
Thanks, Claire, and hi everyone. I'll just do a quick sound check. You can hear me, Claire, and all the others? Yep. Okay, sure, fabulous. That's great. So it's great to have so many people on the line tonight for the last of our public events, and great that even if in a slightly limited capacity we can provide ways for people who aren't in our capital cities to get involved with Solar Citizens. I just also wanted to echo Claire in saying thank you so much to Warwick for joining us this evening and sharing his expertise and knowledge. He's shared it generously with you all on the Hangout tonight, but he regularly provides us with information and advice that is hugely valuable in informing the work that we do. So once again, Warwick, thank you so much. I'm seeing we've got it's about 7:15, so I'm going to try and keep it fairly short. I'm going to give a quick overview of the story of Solar Citizens over the last year, and then a little bit of information about our current campaigns and how everyone tonight can get involved in those. To do that, I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint presentation, which I'm just pulling up now, and I am hoping is working. I will count on my fellow teammates to let me know if there's any problems with seeing that tonight. But as Claire mentioned, I have been working as an advocate for renewable energy, campaigning for more renewable energy in Australia for a number of years now. And over that time, it's been incredible to watch the rise of rooftop solar. Really, that huge proliferation that we've seen, the 1.3 million households, has only happened in the last 3 or 4 years. And so for me, it's been quite incredible to see this whole new body of people that are investors in and advocates for solar in Australia. And that was really what prompted the establishment of Solar Citizens, I guess last year, when I was previously working with the 100% Renewables campaign that some of you will be familiar with, but we kind of went, oh, look at what's happening with solar here and who's representing these voices, and launched Solar Citizens as an initiative of the 100% Renewables campaign. I'm going to flick through these slides. Some of this has been covered by Warwick, so I won't spend long on them. But yeah, huge numbers of people now with solar on their roof, and of course, those 2 million homes represent 4 million voters, and I guess that's really what Solar Citizens is trying to do, is to make our political decision makers and utilities aware that solar owners are not just solar owners, they're also solar voters. Warwick's covered this in depth. The utilities are deeply threatened. And here's a quote from the head of one of our most favoured energy retailer, Origin Energy, where you can see some of the really misleading, demonising type comments that we've been getting from the utility, blaming solar for price rises and so on. And also, unfortunately, not just that kind of rhetoric, not just coming from the utilities, but also some of our government ministers. And we've seen similar statements to this one from Greg Hunt, the Environment Minister, from Tony Abbott, from Ian Macfarlane, as well as, of course, from many of our state premiers and so on. So all of this was what prompted establishment of Solar Citizens, because while those voices of those power companies and those politicians are powerful, and some of the media outlets that are prominent across the country are all too willing to share the views of those retailers, there's also millions of us now, literally, who have a direct experience of solar and can share the truth about what's happening, as well as use our vote and our abilities as citizens of this country to influence the decision-making process. So the next few slides just speak to the kind of activities that we've run over the last year, a bit over a year now since we launched. We launched in May on the Sunrise Breakfast Show, and that's with Koshi there. And since then we've grown to 55,000 members all across the country. Through a combination of online and community activities where we've signed people up. These first few slides show some of the campaigns that were primarily run online in the second half of last year. Those of you in WA will be familiar with this. We saw a headline like this in the Perth papers, I think one Thursday or Friday in August during the federal election campaign, where the Barnett government in WA tried to slash the feed-in tariff for 70,000 families. This was the headline in the papers the following Monday or Tuesday. Premier Barnett coming out and saying, we got it wrong, acknowledging that they'd made a bad mistake and that they were not going to proceed with their attempts to wind back the solar feed-in tariff. And that happened as a result of an absolute outcry of solar owners across the state, who called talkback, who wrote letters to the editor, who wrote to their MPs, called their MPs, and forced these guys to back down very quickly. So any of you on the Hangout tonight who are involved in that, congratulations, and thanks for being part of that, because I think we really showed strong consumer power working with solar owners as well as many from industry, such as Warwick, that evening. Some of the other activities we've been involved in is continuing to push for feed-in tariffs. This was one where South Australia was looking to remove the requirement for a mandated feed-in tariff. They ended up keeping the mandated tariff, although at a much lower rate. And then, of course, Queensland, where there's now 600,000 solar voters in Queensland, 300,000 solar homes, but we've seen continuing attacks from the Queensland government. Here's an ad that was crowdfunded by Queensland Solar Citizens when they attempted to put a fixed fee only on solar homes last year. And then we see responses from Solar Citizens, even just this is an article from just 2 weeks ago. The night that we held our Brisbane Solar Forum, the Queensland Treasurer came out and called these 600,000 solar owners champagne sippers of the latte set, and proceeded to launch a scathing attack on feed-in tariffs. Solar owners really hit back across the media that night and the next day, and you can see the kind of every single one of those letters there is very supportive of more solar. We've run a series of events around the election. This was one that was held up on the Sunshine Coast during the federal election last year, where solar citizens from the electorate held up sun cards if they liked what the politicians were saying, cloudy ones if they didn't, or hot air if they thought the politicians were waffling on and should just shut up. And then many of you will be familiar with the Don't Tax the Sun petition that has nearly 30,000 people signing it, opposing increased fixed fees and tariffs. As Warwick mentioned earlier, this is a picture of the Queensland Energy Minister, Mark McArdle, who gave a commitment not to hit solar homes with this kind of tax. And we also have had similar commitments from New South Wales and South Australian energy ministers. There's work to be done in other states, so if anyone's interested in getting involved with that, let us know. That petition also went to Parliament House at a lobby day at the end of last year. So that gives just a kind of an overview of some of the activities that we have run over the last 12 months. Most of them were online initially, but from the start of this year we are building new volunteer based groups all around the country. And have had 4 set up in the capital cities where there are where the forums that we've just run have been held. The part of the reason for setting up those new volunteer groups is that it is, of course, very challenging for us as a small team of 5 people here in the Sydney office to stay across everything that's happening in the solar sector at the state level all the time, as well as what's happening nationally. So we've set up those state groups to track and work on state issues and continue to prioritise as we go what issues the national campaign team works on. And in doing that, your views are obviously really important to us, and we gather your views through things like surveys, and some of you might have taken part in one we ran in January where it emerged very clearly that our members' priorities were for this year to protect and expand the renewable energy target, as well as to defend against this emerging threat of new fees or tariffs. So they're really the 2 priorities for us this year. Just quickly, Warwick spoke to this slightly, or to some extent, but on that renewable energy target campaign, just thought many of people at the forums have been quite interested to know where's it at, what's happening. Some of you will be familiar with this, but for those who aren't, the federal government did launch yet another review into the renewable energy target when it was elected. It has appointed a supposedly independent panel to report to it. That panel has just finished a series of meetings with stakeholders. But we are very concerned that it is likely to recommend a cut or potentially even an abolition of the renewable energy target to the federal government. It's likely that the recommendations will go to the government sometime in August, and the government will then have to respond after that. So we're really seeing there's 2 ways that we can ensure that the renewable energy target is defended. And one involves some of the guys on your screen right now. These are some of the incoming senators of the Palmer United Party, as well as Vicky Muir from the Motoring Enthusiast Party in Victoria. Any changes the government wants to make to the renewable energy target have to pass through legislative change, which has to pass through Parliament. So that also involves passing through the upper house, and of course these people in the Palmer Party and some of the other crossbenchers will have a really critical role to play over whether there can be any changes made. So we are targeting these guys very much in our campaign work at the moment. And I don't know if anyone from the Sunshine Coast is on the Hangout tonight, but Clive Palmer's holding a festival of Fairfax with his dinosaur theme park open to everyone in his local electorate on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland this weekend, and I think we've got 20 local solar citizens going along to share their story with him this weekend. So the crossbenchers in the Senate will be really important, and the other people to mention are members of the government who are backbenchers but in marginal electorates. And in particular, I think I haven't got any of the figures here, but there are a number of electorates now where politicians are sitting on very tight margins, and there are huge numbers of solar homes, so up to 1 in 4 homes being powered by solar. Palmer actually is one of them. where I think one of the electorates, as an example, Petrie up in Queensland, has something like a margin where 3,000 votes would need to change for the seat to change hand, and there's over 23,000 solar voters. So we'll be working in some of those marginal electorates to make sure those backbenchers understand the level of public support for solar, how many more people want to go solar, and why they need to keep the renewable energy targets strong. So what's the plan specifically? As I mentioned, we've established new state-based groups. We've just wrapped up 4 state-based forums around the country, with the 5th online tonight. We've set a goal to collect 50,000 postcard petitions all around Australia to be delivered to Parliament House in a week of action in August, and we'll be holding a month of meetings throughout July and August off the back of these forums. Beyond August, we'll be beginning that work in those marginal electorates that I just mentioned. Just going to run through a few photos of these are the state groups that have established, and these are from some of the forums. So for those of you who couldn't get along to those events, just get a little bit of a sense of what happened. And you can see a picture here of at each forum we had hundreds of people write handwritten letters to some of those crossbench senators as well as other key decision makers. There's a letter there, and big crowds of people who are really ready to go with this campaign work to show the power of solar owners and supporters. Here's a little table with all our merch. If anyone wants to get a I have solar and I vote bumper sticker for their car or bike, jump on our website, you can order them there. And also you'll see at the back there some solar postcards. These are the ones we hope you might be able to help us to share in your community, tell people what's happening with the renewable energy target at the moment, and we'll of course take them to Canberra again as mentioned. So how can you help? Help spread the word about Solar Citizens and build numbers. You can sign up to get postcards delivered to you, so you can get friends, families and colleagues signing on to them. And obviously the power of word of mouth and talking to people is one of the great powers of Solar Citizens and ordinary citizens. So please tell people what you've learnt tonight to help counter the misinformation. Finally, we hope that those of you who are interested will be willing to meet your MP. There was a question in the survey about whether you've done that before. I think Claire might share the results with that in a moment. And I think we've had a number of people indicate they will indeed be willing to meet their MP. We'll be in touch to let you know how that can happen. Here's a couple of contact details. If you want to order any of those postcards, do so by emailing that address, and send us your address, let us know how many you want. And if you haven't already completed the survey, please do so there to let us know if you're keen to meet your local MP. So thanks very much everyone for joining us. I'll hand back to Claire now, but would like to say I strongly believe we can, using our energy and enthusiasm for solar all across the country, fight back against the utilities and make sure our governments start to stand with ordinary consumers instead of these big power companies. It's just going to take many more of us getting active and involved, and I hope all of you will be a part of that. And thanks for all your involvement so far. Back to you, Claire.
Thanks very much, Lindsay. So Lindsay Suter, the Director of Solar Citizens, speaking with you just then. We're going to wrap up now, but before I do, what was really, really encouraging to hear from our survey is that while 41% of the people tuned in tonight this evening have met with their Member of Parliament before, 60% of people are willing to do that this time around this issue. So that's really encouraging to see, and as Lindsay mentioned, we will be back in touch with how you can do that, and we'll make it as easy as possible for you to both arrange that meeting and then go and have that meeting, and also possibly get the local papers interested in that activity as well. We'll leave it there for tonight. If you do have any feedback or further questions, do send us an email at info@solarcitizens.org.au. You can visit our website to find out more information on supporting the renewable energy target or our other campaigns. And do follow us on Facebook or Twitter. It's very easy to find us if you search for Solar Citizens. And we hope you found this information useful, and please do spread the word with your neighbours, friends and colleagues. We look forward to speaking with you really soon, and thanks again for your time.